When I was in my 20s, I'd say the two things I predominantly wrote were poetry and comedy, because I was running this professional insulter character on the Renaissance Festival circuit. So I was constantly perched somewhere with spiral notebook in hand, devising the most vicious insults I could. Um, and then trotting those out for $5 or $10 or eventually $20 a pop at fairs. So there was that phase. Towards my late 20s, early 30s, I had a friend who was putting on this event called Theater Walk with all my friends were doing. And she was using 10-minute or one-act plays. So I started reading a bunch of those, and I started writing short plays for her and for that event. That eventually led to full-length plays. Then right about my late 30s, I went, oh, fuck, I was going to be a novelist.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 109 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host, Adrian M. Gibson, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction, fantasy, and writing craft. Joining me, as always, my co-host, the Chewie to my Han Solo, the Joker to my Commander Shepard, MJ Kuhn. How you doing, MJ?
Hello. I am doing lovely. How are you?
Doing very well. And just to, we're talking to a master of thieves, so I got to pimp my thiefy girl's books. If you want to support MJ and her work, you can pick up Among Thieves, The Blue Baby. That's her debut novel. And the sequel, Thick Ass Thieves, Green Baby. For that double dose of thieving goodness, go support MJ and what she does.
If you want to fight the thieves, support Adrian. You see what I did there? But yes, my lovely Adrian's book is Mushroom Blues, police procedural. Oh yeah, you have your own copies now. I got to get one of my real ones, not
without the like
advanced copies,
like not for resale.
I know. I have one of your advanced ones here, but yes, pick it up now and support lovely Adrian.
Yeah, if you want to be a thief or an anti-thief, we got you covered.
Yeah. Pick your side.
Pick your side, man. As well, a quick note for listeners, the official SFF Addicts Patreon and merch store are live, so check the links in the description to support what we do here. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app, and subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel, where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. And now, welcoming today's lovely guest, the esteemed Christopher Buehlman, author of Those Across the River, Between Two Fires, The Blacktongue Thief, and more, including the soon-to-be-released The Daughter's War. Welcome to the show, Chris. How are you?
I'm good, Adrian, MJ. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic. We had some fun pregame chatter, so I'm just I'm in a good mood, man.
Yeah, me too.
We're usually always in a good mood on this podcast anyways, but
yeah, I know. We're usually super angry.
Yeah. No guest comes on and be like, you guys are just dour as shit.
Right? Like, wow, lighten up, guys.
Pick it up. Okay, Chris, we're going to start off with a little intro for listeners who aren't familiar with you, your work. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I've got 5 horror five horror novels out there.
I just collect the authors. There.
You collect authors. I got it. Hard to get them on that short shelf, but we make it work.
Just shove them in there.
No, I wrote for Penguin back before it was Penguin Random House. Those Across the River, as you mentioned, a couple others, Between Two Fires, and I turned over a new leaf and went into fantasy. With Tor, starting in 2021 when they published The Blacktongue Thief. I'm from Florida originally, but I worked on the Renaissance Festival circuit for a very, very long time. My wife is still there, so I occasionally fly in where she's performing, and she'll fly back, and et cetera. But I've got a nice home in Ohio now, and got a rescued dog and a couple of cats, and yeah, things are good.
That sounds lovely.
I was gonna say.
I like how you transition into fantasy. You're like, I turned a new leaf.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like horror, it's just a bit too much. So I
wasn't scratching the itch anymore. I want some goblins in my life.
Make no mistake. I will be venturing back into those waters eventually, but I'm really enjoying fantasy as well.
We do both very well. So
yeah, I was gonna say, well, that's what I love about the fantasy, sci-fi, horror, like all those genres kind of often being lumped together, is I do feel like it gives authors in this space the opportunity to, take a new genre for a spin without having to like come up with a whole new pen name and like do the whole thing that a lot of people do when they genre switch, which is pretty cool.
Before we dig deeper into the episode, a quick word from our sponsor.
Strap in for a fast-paced heist that rockets through the gritty void of outer space. Chloe's Kingdom by Gregory Michael is a pulse-pounding sci-fi adventure that keeps readers on their toes from start to finish. Let's dive right into the story. Chloe Espinosa is a wild-haired petty thief aboard the Kingdom, a drifting city spaceship. Once rich but now poor, Chloe is determined to break free from the honeycombs and return to her life in the gardens. Only one problem. She hardly has enough coin for her burrito, making a lavish apartment seem as distant as the stars. All that might change, however, when Chloe is offered a heist that could make her unimaginably rich. But she can't break into the impenetrable coin vault alone. We have a young mastermind who can't let go of her past, a mathematical genius in desperate need of coin, a privileged kid from the gardens with a debt to pay, a bartender who's serving revenge, a mischievous raccoon with bottomless appetite, and a battered soul who's been wronged by the council. Their plan? To rob the treasury and bring down the corrupt council. But in a game where the stakes are jail or death, every move could be their last. A top 15 Amazon bestseller and number 2 in hot new releases, Chloe's Kingdom is packed with heart-stopping action, mind-bending twists, and an unforgettable adventure through the stars. This is a must-read for fans of sci-fi and heist thrillers. Chloe's Kingdom is available now exclusively on Amazon, free on Kindle Unlimited, or you can grab your copy on Kindle, paperback, or hardcover today.
And now, enjoy the rest of this episode of SFF Addicts.
So, we like to dig into our guests' past interests and origin stories on this show. So I would like to know if you remember the books or movies, games, whatever it was when you were younger that got you into science fiction, fantasy, horror, any of that. And if you remember how that coalesced in you wanting to become a writer.
Well, I'll tell you that one of the first culprits for fantasy will have been Creature Feature. Back when I was a kid, there was this movie matinee that would be on TV every Saturday back in St. Petersburg, Florida, with a local personality called Dr. Paul Bearer. And he would show all these 1950s, 60s, early 70s, mainly monster movies. This is where I got scratched the Godzilla itch. This is where I got introduced to Ray Harryhausen, whose work I absolutely love. So yeah, I'd say that it was living statues and cyclopes and dragons on television that did the fantasy thing. As far as horror, like many Gen Xers, my first pusher was King. Yeah, I'm a fairly ordinary stamp in that way.
It's just King just pushing those.
I mean, he's got like a whole menagerie of stories, so it's not
if anyone's
surprising.
Gonna get you into horror, like King is a pretty damn good one. But
yes, I feel like a common gateway drug into the genre.
Yeah, because here you are as a preteen, and you walk into your local store where they got spinny wire rack of novels, and there's this shiny one with a faceless kid on it, and you're like, ooh, what's this? The Shining. Oh, I think I heard a story from this. I think this one's spooky. I'll take it home. And you do, and you get stuck on a word, and you're like, Dad, what's a prick? And the book disappears. It just disappears.
You have to find it again years later.
Where'd my faceless kid go?
But I know where to get it, and I know not to ask questions.
And I'll figure out what prick means one day.
Right.
Don't you worry.
The days before Google.
No, man, we had to look up in a stupid encyclopedia.
Right.
Oh, man.
How do we get anything done?
Yeah, but I think prick was probably like more of a like a slang at that point, as opposed to like encyclopedia worthy. Who knows?
Yeah, I would think so.
there was no like Urban Dictionary back then.
Yeah, I was gonna say, oh my gosh, can you imagine a printed Urban Dictionary?
That would be insane. Oh my god, there would be like
the Urban Dictionary was older kids.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's true. Was your older brother. Was the Urban Dictionary.
That kid down the street.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man. So how was it, like, you went from Creature Feature and Stephen King, Paul Bearer, also like Mr. Paul Bearer, like shout out to that. That is a really
Doctor, yeah.
Ooh, that is like Dr. Paul Bearer is a good one.
Oh yeah.
How did you go from that to being like, okay, I want to start writing my own stuff? Because it's like, I know you write like poetry, you write fiction, all kinds of stuff. So it's like you have probably like a more broad sort of approach to writing than a lot of authors that we know in the SFF space. But like, how did you get into it?
Well, I'll say that there wasn't much space between all that, because as soon as I know that people told stories as a kid, I was trying to tell stories. I'm sure it was the same for you guys. And I'll address the question, like, how did I come to write in different formats? Yeah. It was very cyclic for me. Like, as a teenager, I really liked short stories. I read a lot of horror shorts, and so I wrote some horror shorts that I wouldn't show anybody now, when I was like 18, 19. I started writing sort of I guess you'd call it a sci-fi / fantasy, like one of those ones where I thought I was reinventing the whole, you think it's a fantasy story, but it's actually post-apocalypse, not knowing that everybody had done that. So, but I had this story I was working on. I wrote it out in pencil in my early 20s for like a year and a half or 2 years. I wouldn't show that with anybody either. But when I was in my 20s, I'd say the two things I predominantly wrote were poetry and comedy, because I was running this professional insulter character on the Renaissance Festival circuit. So I was constantly perched somewhere with spiral notebook in hand, devising the most vicious insults I could, and then trotting those out for $5 or $10 or eventually $20 a pop at fairs. So, there was that phase. Towards my late 20s, early 30s, I had a friend who was putting on this event called Theater Walk that all my friends were doing. And she was using 10-minute or one-act plays. So I started reading a bunch of those, and I started writing short plays for her and for that event. That eventually led to full-length plays. Then right about my late 30s, I went, oh, fuck, I was going to be a novelist. I better get on that.
Just kind of detoured quite a bit.
It was kind of like that. It was like,
got distracted.
I've been doing all this fun shit, but I was going to write novels since I was 10. I need to do this thing now. I had taken a stab in my early 30s. I wrote the first version of Those Across the River when I was like 31. You can kind of tell looking at it, it's a young man's book. I mean, all the main characters do is fuck. And yeah, so I got that out of the drawer and polished it up and got an agent, and that's where that went. Since then, I've also experimented with television. I got a short on Creepshow when they rebooted that, called The Man in the Suitcase, and that's why I've got my Writers Guild card. Ooh,
fancy boy.
Yeah. So I will say that I didn't study writing formally. I don't know if either of you guys did, but I was a French major and a history minor at university, and as I, there were times early in my career when I sort of regretted not going in for a creative writing thing. I thought I would have made connections and I would have learned things faster that I had to sort of discover being self-taught. But in retrospect, I really subconsciously or unconsciously gave myself a kind of a perfect apprenticeship for novel writing because, I learned comedy. I learned imagery and brevity with the poetry. I learned dialogue from writing plays. I was out here working at Renaissance festivals, and I was doing stage combat, scenes, and I learned archery and stuff just as a hobby. So I've got hands-on experience that's valuable for a history or a fantasy author. So, and also being a languages guy helps with the fantasy world too. So I'm kind of in a good place for writing fantasy.
You set yourself up well by accident.
Yeah.
Which I think is probably like kind of the coolest thing about so many science fiction and fantasy and horror authors is like they stumble into things a lot of the time, which is why like so many authors kind of get to it later in life, where it's like all of that lived experience really attributes to a mind that can process these things a little better, can process the sort of creative amalgamations that are stories in a way. Like for you, all of these experiences, like you said, like this gave me more experience with dialogue, this with brevity, et cetera, et cetera. Like this ties perfectly. We actually have a question from one of our patrons, David Hopkins, who specifically brought up your time as Christoph the Insulter, which is fantastic. Just like the name in and of itself is great, but how that influenced you as a writer. And if you feel like there are unexpected things that doing, your Ren Fair performances, but also just all the things that you did in your adult life that led to you finally tackling writing novels, if you found any unexpected inspirations along the way.
So the question is, how did my time as Christoph the Insulter sort of spin my writing career? Is that the question?
Yeah, and if there were unexpected things that you encountered along the way that you look back on as like, that was amazing, and how like it influenced my life or it influenced my writing.
There were so many experiences. It's hard to reach into the bag and just pull one out. I'll say that I got some skills that have helped from that career, particularly. Like I've gotten good at knowing where people's line is, like, because when I was doing that work, people who had only a surface understanding of what I was doing would be like, "Oh, I could do what you do. I'm funny and I'm mean." And I'm like, it's not the mean part that's the hard part. The hard part is being able to hit this narrow aperture in between something that is edgy and something that actually hurts somebody's feelings. Because I never wanted to actually do that. In fact, I was always aiming to make the victim laugh. That was my secret goal. I wasn't performing to a crowd at this person's detriment. The actual focus was the person. So I guess I've learned how to do edgy stuff with empathy. That's one way to put it.
Because it works really well for fiction as well, because it's like you're constantly, I mean, for me, like the stories that really, the ones that hit hardest, there's like a deep well of emotions, and there are things that are troubling to deal with, but at the same time, it's delivering it to you in a way that doesn't like bash you over the head or make you feel like shit or make you angry. It's like a comedian doing crowd work, finding that fine line between how am I going to be most effective with the things that I say so that I hit the right balance between funny and, like you say, like empathetic, and just kind of hitting all those notes at the same time.
Yeah. And also just some of the physical practicalities of like wearing the costumes in all kinds of weather. Like whenever I've got a scene where Galva's oiling her boots, and she puts them out in the sun so they'll get warmer and drink in the oil. And that's a trick I learned. That's something I did with my own big ass leather boots, so yeah, waterproofing leather cloaks and being out in the rain in them is not unfamiliar to me. Yeah. Knowing.
And being able to crack a joke even when times are rough.
Yeah. Yeah.
A critical fantasy character skill.
That is a core life skill.
Super fair.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk a little more about some of the elements in the book. So we've gotten to the point where you have all these experiences, right? And you've written these incredible books. One of the things that I hear people praise a lot in your works, and I've noticed reading your works, is the atmosphere that you create through the book. Right? Like all of the ones I've read for years for sure, but like the one that comes to mind immediately is Between Two Fires. Like that whole book, like as I'm reading it, like, oh my gosh. So I want to ask for you, what all goes into atmosphere, right? Like when you're creating the atmosphere, right? Like what are the elements what are the strings you're trying to pull on to create that? And do you have any tips or tricks for creating that really consistent atmosphere that kind of bleeds into every page?
I don't know if there's a trick to it. I'll just tell you about process. I mean, part of the reason that I am a slower writer is because I really have to build up a head of steam to get the writing train moving. And if I am interrupted, if I've got other things to do, it will often delay it, sometimes by a long time, before I can sort of get my head fully back into that world. Like when I was writing Between Two Fires, man, I was reading almost nothing but medieval literature. I was watching medieval films. I was living in the world deeply. I was using my French for once because, I had this degree that served for little except to make me sound like I knew what I was doing in a French restaurant. And but suddenly, here comes this book that I feel so passionate about, and I'm now looking for historical sources. And I've said this in other interviews when people ask me about that book, because this is fascinating to me. Like, I was trying, when I was writing the journey of the characters through Paris, and they go over Ile de la Cité, and then they go into the Latin Quarter, and I know Paris reasonably well. I've been there a few times, but so I know what bridges to take now, but bridges collapse and are built and are rebuilt. And I was like, where the fuck am I going to find out what bridges were across the Seine in specifically 1348? Well, nothing in English. I couldn't find a thing in English. Happily, there was a book, big, thick fucker, called An Atlas of Medieval Paris in French, and I could read it. So it had exactly the information I wanted. So when you're in there reading the bit about the one bridge that has the water wheels at the bottom and bodies are getting caught up in it because people were dumping bodies in the river because they were dying so fast. No, that's all real, and that's thanks to what I did. What was the question?
There you go. Put that degree to good use. I love it.
Atmosphere.
Well, that kind of touches in though, because it was about creating the atmosphere, but it seems like it's a lot of research and just kind of really sinking into the environment mentally while you're writing is your process. Yeah. It's like method acting, but for writing a little bit, right?
That's a very good way to put it, MJ. That is a really, really good way to put it. Like, and I was in a dark place when I was writing that book. I went to Avignon and I stayed there for about a week and a half of a 3-week French journey, where I also went to Auxerre and other points in the book. But when I was in Avignon and I was doing nothing but getting up, getting a little breakfast, getting some coffee, writing, going to the Papal Palace, coming back, writing. I was getting some dreams. I was getting some really, really dark and disturbing dreams while I was in nothing but devils and deviltry for all that time.
But that's kind of a fascinating thing about the human mind, is that we can immerse ourselves so deeply in something that it permeates like every aspect of our life. You know, like when I was creating my world, it's like there's just so much mushrooms in it that is like I just like started having really, really vivid dreams about mushrooms, and, and like that stuff like infects your mind in brilliant ways. But in the end, it's like when a reader picks it up and they're like, this world just completely engrosses me. It's like if the writer can pull that off for themselves, then it's like the reader is going to be able to do that. You know?
Yeah. If it feels real to you, it will feel real to your reader.
You're like the Daniel Day-Lewis of SFF.
Yes, I love it.
But it also makes you boring, because I would hate to be my wife, like having me to talk to when I'm so obsessed about one thing. It's like, yeah.
It's like, you're like, sorry. I don't if you don't like this one, wait till the next book.
I got some more 14th century shit to say. Come back.
Right. Just running.
And that's why we have friends outside of our marriage and our relationships.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm going to spout this shit to somebody else so that you don't have to hear
I'll give you a break.
This is what I go to escorts for.
There you just talk their ears
talk about
13th
century horror.
$200. I got to talk to you about the Pope. Pope Clement, his name.
Yeah. It's like, can I take my pants? No. Keep your pants on.
You stay over there. You listen.
Chris, actually, I was curious. Like, I don't know if you dabble in video games much, but have you played the games A Plague Tale?
I thought you were going to say Dark Souls, because people
Dark Souls is very but you know, we're talking about like medieval France and stuff. A Plague Tale is very, very cool.
I've heard really good things about it. I haven't played it yet.
I don't play video games, and I don't play role-playing games. And that is because I had experiences with both of those phenomena when I was a young man. And I don't have a middle gear. So I don't do those things because I want to write books.
Yeah, that's you totally would do nothing else. There are a few video games I have not touched and will not touch, like World of Warcraft, because I know it will become my life. And I can't afford to have that become my life.
Well, you dealt with that with Baldur's Gate a little bit.
I did. Yeah, that's the thing. And that was just like single player. Like I was just playing that by myself. Imagine now that it's like an online multiplayer. You would never see me again.
Like MJ's gone, man.
Baldur's Gate, is that the one with the cosplay favorite? I think it's called Asterion. It's like a vampire elf. Asterion. Yeah.
I romanced Asterion, and then he dumped me. I lost my fictional boyfriend.
I didn't think he liked girls. I saw him described as an evil twink once.
He totally is. He's I think I'm not sure if all the romanceable characters are bisexual, but a lot of them are. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah. Asterian's poly as well. You can have a poly relationship.
There you go.
Asterion. Yeah, you can do all kinds of stuff in Baldur's Gate. I'm telling you.
Nothing worse than a jealous vampire.
Yeah.
Right? God. Ugh.
That shit gets messy real fast. But A Plague Tale is really cool in particular because it's just like the whole plague element, but there's also like in the second game there's like rat physics where they have like swarms of rats and they have their own like sort of physics engine to control this like wave of rats that is continuously like chasing you. Yeah,
that sounds fun.
Yeah, super cool. Okay, so we're gonna dig deeper into your work a little bit because you know we've talked about the fact that you've written horror, you've got dark medieval vibes, you got comedic fantasy like in The Blacktongue Thief, which also gets quite dark in a lot of ways. But for you, what is the most challenging thing about writing a range of voices and sort of tones? Because I feel like your work kind of runs the gamut of of a lot of different kinds of tones and character voices.
One reviewer called me protean, and as soon as I looked that up, I agreed. Yeah,
I know. I have to look it up. I don't know what that means.
It means somebody who does a bunch of different things and disappears into
Tending
it.
to change easily.
Yeah.
Ability to do multiple things and versatile. There you go,
Like a
listeners.
shapeshifter.
We've all learned a new word today.
Yeah. I don't know what is difficult about it. You know what's difficult about it? Trying to write a 3-book series when you're used to being protean. That's difficult. I am having a little bit of trouble with that. Because my brain, is like, I want to move on to other things, but these guys are still interesting, and the story is still here to be told. So it can be an effort of discipline to stay in it, even though I love it. It's just like I need some strange. So going back to the poly theme, it's like, I'm married to Kinch. And I actually had to go tell him to go stand over there and be with Galva for a while. So now I'm ready to go back to Kinch. So I'm enjoying writing the sequel now, but I needed a break. So now I'm back.
Like a breather in between.
Yeah.
Be like, you go stand in the corner and watch for a while.
You go stand in the corner and watch. It's okay. He'll come back with a bunch of shit he stole. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. You know what? That sounds like a win-win to me for everybody. Everybody wins.
Gifts for everyone, for Chris and Galva.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm curious too, because we talked a little bit about your research process when we touched on the atmosphere conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of the kind of protean quality of your genre, kind of hopping, but you've done some kind of very historical horror, like In Between Two Fires, where it's like set in a very real world setting, and now you have these fantasy novels that are second world fantasy. And I'm curious how your research process looks, how it differs, right? Like, what was it scary almost, I don't know, to approach something that is now like a completely different genre from what you'd done before from a research front?
Well, it isn't all that different from creating worlds for role-playing games, which I was doing as a teenager. So Invention is a bit harder than research, but a bit more fun for me. So there are still elements of research, like, as I mentioned in the acknowledgments of the Daughters' War, Christian Cameron was really, really useful for me to speak to. And when I was trying to kind of figure out what a war would look like between humans and a smaller humanoid, there's some very real physics stuff there to be overcome. And as a guy who's done so much combat reenactment, he's been in shield walls and stuff. So he was a great guy to talk to about all of that. So I think that was the most research. I had to research whaling too at one point when I was writing the Blacktongue Thief.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh yeah, okay, I can see that from. Yeah, I was like, wait, where would whaling? And then I remembered.
No, but it's like even the whaling part is like not that big of a section of the book.
That's how it always goes, though. Like, oh I literally have had times where I go down like a 4-hour research rabbit hole because I'm trying to find one detail about one thing. And I don't even write historical. Like, I've heard of people that are historical fiction authors that will spend a full day of writing time researching what kind of buckles were on these shoes, because readers that care will care. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like the ones that will notice if you get it wrong, and they'll care. You know what I mean? So it's like those little details matter.
They matter so much. When I was with Penguin, my editor, Tom Colgan, he told me, so for those across the river, you got some gunplay in there. He was like, make sure you got that stuff right, because we don't get letters nearly as savage as the ones that we get when somebody messes up a gun thing. Yeah. Like, yeah, I totally believe that.
Yeah, I believe it too, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, Crystal Matar helped me with Mushroom Blues about like, because her neighbor is a police officer. So she went through that whole process. Basically, that person was like their sensitivity reader for like
cop stuff.
Yeah. So she did a pass through my book and like picked up on any details that were like, yeah, you might need to tweak this. And I think like, yeah. And like Christian Cameron is the perfect person to talk to about like, how can I get
100%.
this? Because I've talked to him about like
He's
how
so
much
smart.
he not only does he like research so much in terms of like the books that he reads and everything like that, but also the reenactments and everything that you said, like going to Greece and participating in like in festivals and all this kind of stuff. And like I love Christian for that because he's so obsessive and so nerdy about it. But like,
dude,
he's like the perfect friend to have as well when your wife is tired of listening to you and you can talk to someone who's like, give me more.
Right. You know
Forget
who wants that next fact about 14th century England or France or whatever? Christian
Forget the
does.
escort. I got a friend who wants to know all of it.
Do you have a favorite detail you learned from him? Because I do.
From Crit.
Well, I was going to ask you about historical facts you've learned. So
yeah. This is from his series Writing Fighting, which is so entertaining. I don't know if you've seen it. I believe it's on Instagram and Twitter. Can't remember where I follow it now, but probably both. Anyway,
but I've seen it on Twitter specifically. But I think he has it like on Reels and stuff like that on Instagram too. Well,
if you see a piece of chest armor, right, and it's got that kind of upside down V here, or this V rather here, very real reason for that. That's what keeps it from going up into your throat. That V is here so that the blade comes up and gets deflected up over your shoulder instead of into your Adam's apple, or where the Adam's apple would be.
Damn, that's so cool.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
No,
it's kind of like why the female armor that they put on women where they give the armor boobs never makes sense, because I'm like, wouldn't that just funnel the sword
right to the throat
into your throat?
No, but that's why I find armor in especially in films and television to be like very egregious, because it's like a woman doesn't need to accentuate their boobs in armor.
These metal titties are going to distract everybody, Adrian. It's giving me the advantage on the battlefield.
Showing off the metal titties. No one's going to want to stab me.
Here's another egregious thing, and I understand it for the dramatics and the narrative and all of that, but I just wish once that you'd have a main character, like somebody you're really attached to, going into battle and getting immediately struck in the fucking head with a crossbow bolt because they never wear helmets.
Yes.
Never.
Okay. Literally, my first novel I ever wrote, and I call it a novel generously, because it will never. It's like the one you were talking about. I will never let anyone see it. But I literally had one of my main characters get killed in the first 2 minutes of a battle by an arrow, because I was like, why does that never fucking happen? Like, she's dead. Yeah. And my beta readers were really mad about it. So,
but all these guys with and gals with perfect hair, man, going into battle, it's like, dude, there's an axe coming there.
Right at you. Eowyn has her "I'm no man" moment, and then just from behind. A whole different vibe.
But she had to take off her helmet to do that.
She did. Yeah. It was like her "I'm the girl snowboarder" from an early 2000s movie moment.
Yeah.
I love that moment. So like, let's be real.
That is a very specific reference to like, I'm like a snowboarder, or I'm like a motorcyclist and I'm female, and I'm going to take off my helmet and fucking switch.
And I'm going to shake my blonde tresses out.
That's a trope.
Well, speaking of badass ladies, look at that transition.
Damn.
I want to talk about your newest release, or upcoming release, The Daughter's War. So first of all, just for our listeners that may not have, be familiar with it, can you pitch our listeners on The Daughter's War?
Sure. This is a book that people who've read it have called an ode to loss, or an ode to grief, but it's a war story, and it's an unflinching one. It's the story of a 20-year-old girl who goes fresh from the academy, where she's learned all these intricate secrets of sword fighting. She's an amazing personal combatant, but she's now thrown into a meat grinder. And she's part of an experimental unit that uses stag-sized corvids, battle ravens, basically flightless, but to try to even the playing field against the goblins who have killed our horses and killed almost all of the men. So it's like these ravens and some new tactics have come just in the nick of time. And The Daughter's War is part of this world, but it is absolutely a standalone book. You can feel perfectly comfortable picking that one up first if you want to read the characters' stories chronologically. And you can also go back and read it as a prequel if you read Blacktongue and decide you want to get to know more about this character, Galva, who we see in Blacktongue only through the lens of Kinch's narration. Galva narrates her own story. It's a first-person account in The Daughter's War. And part of the reason it took me so long to write this one was because I started off writing it in the third person from multiple points of view. And I didn't like it.
Interesting. No, because I really enjoyed that it was very intimate, right? It was very much in because especially since Galva is from Blacktongue, she is such a kind of sort of walled off character a bit, right? And so I think it was really, I can see where it would be the decision you would end up making to go, no, to get into this character, I need to actually get into her head,
Yeah, but I didn't trust her voice at first. Like, I was used to having Kinch, who's this funny dude.
Right, wisecracking guy.
Oh, yeah. But now am I going to tell this story with this quiet warrior? And I needed to know her better to write the prequel. It's not just that I needed a break from Kinch. I needed to know her deeply and intimately in a way that I only could. Because I also knew I eventually wanted to talk about this Goblin War, but anything I had her say offhand in the sequel was going to become gospel. And we're going to form the parameters of the eventual Goblin book. So happily, Tor was open enough and recognized how passionate I was to tell the story of the Goblin Wars, to let me reverse sequence and do this prequel before the sequel. Best decision that I made, best decision my editor made was letting me do it. I'm really proud of it, and it's helping the sequel so much because I'm in the sequel now, and man, I absolutely love one thing I really enjoyed about writing poetry was I did a lot of free verse, but I did some form poetry, and I love the discipline of form poetry. And while everything that Galva said about the Goblin Wars in the Blacktongue Thief was a fence, it was also a support, because I could then go back and take apart, deconstruct all of her words. Like, there's a scene where Kinch is about to take the head off of a bull-headed brigand that they've killed in the woods, and she won't let him decapitate their fallen foe. And she's like, "This is something that goblins do. They have a game where they play with heads and spears. Are you a goblin?" So I took that and went, well, we need to see that game. So yeah.
Also, I love your Spanish accent.
Thank you. More Renaissance Festival stuff. I played the Spanish ambassador, Don Bernardino de Mendoza, for many years at the Sterling Renaissance Festival. Nice. That is a fun accent to do an angry clown with, because I played that character as a pissed off foil, very erect. I remember once I had a sword fight with the English piratess, and she was like, "I haven't seen a Spaniard so angry since I sunk the Doña Ana." And I said, "You sunk the Doña Ana? If you say one more thing disparaging of my king or my country, I will kick you so hard in the darkest part of your womb that all of your children will be born smelling like the foot of Mendoza."
Oh my god, dude! You have like the Because now that I live in Ecuador, like I speak like Latin American Spanish, but then like I can understand sort of like Castellano, and you have like the sort of, I don't know what it is about like they have this like raspiness to their voice that you captured perfectly. This sort of kind of thing is like that is just chef's kiss, dude. Chef's kiss.
Thank you.
Oh my God. You. But I love how you like, obviously it must have been really difficult to sort of dig into the stoicism of Galva and change to first person to be able to kind of like dig deeper into her personality and everything. But I also kind of wanted to get your sense of like what it was like to get back into this world. You mentioned earlier how difficult it was to be like, I'm writing a trilogy, shit, you know, but like right. Also kind of just like returning to a space that you've already been to and deciding, okay, I'm going to hone in on a prequel. I'm going to hone in on Galva, but I'm also going to hone in on a major event like the Daughters' War, which is referenced a lot throughout the Blacktongue Thief, and basically like bring that event to life.
The biggest challenge for me was similar to the challenge that I had in Between Two Fires when I had to describe the armies of hell, and I had to describe hell. You know, like you can't do that without going there. I don't have time for a warm personal devil who's like, well, you got me this time, Mr. Smith, but I'll see you down the road. No,
it's like he's going to kick you in the womb, in the darkest parts of the
womb. I needed hell to be terrifying. I needed devils that you didn't want to encounter ever, and I wanted angels you didn't want to encounter ever. They were equally terrifying, just in different ways. So the goblins the war had been so built up in the Blacktongue Thief as being this horrific event that I had to spend some real time thinking about what it would be like to be in this struggle for survival between species who are equally intelligent, but one of which eats the other one. So it was like
sinking into the cannibalism.
Dude, into the cannibalism, but also just into the industry with which they conduct their war and the brutality. You know, the fact that they're going to make you feed they're going to take your city over. You'll be in horde law now, and they'll make you feed yourselves. You still have to go out there and farm, and you have to tithe to us a certain amount of people from your city. But also, everybody, when you reach puberty, we're going to go ahead and cut a tendon in your leg so that you don't run or jump. You can still plow, you can still walk, but you're not such a great combatant anymore.
Yeah. So, I mean, there was so much darkness. I mean, but it was because I just finished the Daughters' War a couple of days ago, actually. So it's very fresh.
Nice.
It's very fresh in my mind. But I felt like it was such a cool perspective to see it through Galva and her being so young. Like you mentioned, she's 20 and she's fresh out because she comes in kind of or those very early chapters. She's like a little nervous, but she's, got the gumption. And then you see in those first few encounters, and then as they keep going by, it's like you feel the kind of color starting to dry. It was really. I can see where people say it's like an ode to grief or an ode to loss, because it is loss in the sense that there's war and stuff. But you see, not that Galva was like super bright-eyed and all rainbows and stuff, but there is still a loss of innocence throughout the tale for her as well.
It's
definitely.
It's like like depictions of like World War I or World War II, where you see the soldiers kind of like awaken to the reality of the circumstances.
Yes.
And it's like, oh shit. You see their innocence like literally sort of like sucked away.
I'm glad you felt like I captured that. If it sounds like you're saying that you felt like I did, because that was one of the things I really wanted. I really wanted an arc in there. I really wanted us to start with a Galva whose big challenges were that she didn't think she liked men, and she was probably going to have to marry one, and she wanted to make sure her sword work was good, and she had issues with her father, and her brothers were so much older she didn't know them well, except the younger one whom she loves. Those were her problems. And then she goes to a place where you can starve to death. You could be sexually assaulted. You can be butchered for meat.
You could be gentled, right? Like that, or whatever it's called. I forget the term you use for it, but it's really haunting the way that the goblins kind of
strip you of your
turn
brain,
the people
turn you into
into
livestock.
basically farm animals. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but and before a listener thinks that this thing is just this miserable, bleak experience, the gift of letting Galva tell her story, trusting her to tell her story, was that I discovered that in place of humor and snark and insultery, which is all very entertaining, I got heart from Galva. Like when I really let her talk, I discovered her vulnerability. I discovered her love of beauty, her appreciation for beauty, her appreciation for courage, but different types of courage. Like she doesn't just like soldiers. She isn't a killing machine. She's a very well trained human who has complex relationships, very complex relationships with her siblings and others. And boy, discovering all of that, finding moments where she really got to share a laugh with, like, the old soldier toward the end, or with her friendship kind of relationship with Innocenta, and her feelings of first love for Queen Mireia. I mean, these were really appealing things to write about that really had nothing to do with violence and misery. These were human experiences that I really got to round out against the backdrop of the darkness. There's a chiaroscuro to it that I really came to enjoy.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
It is. Well, and it makes both things, stand out all the more powerfully, right? When you have the darkness and the bleakness and all of those things, but you do also have the beauty and I will not spoil anything, but the ending was incredibly beautiful. So, I really liked that ending. So, but okay, so we got to wind down part 1 of our conversation, but don't be too sad, listeners. We still have a part 2. So for winding down, what's we want to do like kind of a broad career perspective for you, since you do have a variety of projects and a variety of things and a wealth of experiences. Across all your projects, have you noticed a change in your writing process, your writing style? Like we hear people talk about plotting versus pantsing and da. But I feel like any of us that have written more than one book know that each book is kind of its own thing, and your process evolves as it goes. So how has your process evolved throughout your career?
Ooh, that's a hard one to answer for the reasons you mentioned, because it's not like you learn how to write books generically. You have to learn how to write each book, and I think that maybe I would like to say that the time it takes you to learn to write each book gets to be less, but I think the time it takes me to write each book gets to be more. Like as I hold myself to I guess higher and higher standard. I could have banged out a multiple perspective book about the Daughters' War, and it would have been good, and I would have moved on. But I had to try and fail and try and fail and keep failing until finally it was near. I want to say it was near Christmas in 2022. And I just sat down at the computer and I looked at how I had struggled for most of a year to get through 30,000 pages that were not coming. And I said, what the fuck have I got to lose? Let me just, for funsies, I'm going to have Galva write a chapter. Let's see what that sounds like. And I fell in love with her voice. I did. So I'd say the thing.
She wasn't even going to be one of the POVs.
She was, but it was going to be third person.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay. Yeah, I was like, whoa. Okay.
Yeah. No, I let her use her words. Yeah. I let her use her words. And I found that simpler vernacular that she has, because she speaks very simply. which I love. You know, I actually have, this is a longer answer than you wanted.
No, keep it going.
No, this is great.
Okay. I actually did edits where I went by and I checked for author intrusion. I was like, are these Chris words or golf words? You know? And I combed through all of it. I combed through the whole thing, and I suspected the long, university words. And I wanted to keep the words from the heart. I wanted the entire vernacular to be coming from down here, not up here. And I don't know if I'd have had the fortitude to say, no, this book's not ready yet, and sit with it until it was exactly what I wanted. And this is.
Yeah. And the result is like something that has the concise language of this character, but it's also like a perfect reflection of her society and everything around her. Also, it's like a perfect reflection of how Spaniards speak English, which is like, you know, if anyone wants to, like, I love, we talked about The Princess Bride in a recent episode, but I love how Inigo Montoya, how he speaks. There's like a simple eloquence to the way in which he speaks. And I think you captured that really well with Galva. Even though she has this stoicism to her in The Blacktongue Thief, you gave her the room to breathe in this book. But it's like a concise, simple eloquence, which I really love.
Thank you. Yeah, I loved also being able to get in there with letters from other people and accounts from other people so that I could get in there with a different vernacular. I love the way her father speaks. I don't know if I like him that much as a person, but the Duke of Braga is a fascinating motherfucker. He's so smart. He's like he's got that one letter. He got that one letter where he's like his shitty oldest kid has gambled away his armor and almost the shield, and he's like, I will buy the armor back. And no, he says, if you do this again, I will strip you of your armor. I will call. Please remember that this was made by a man with a 3-year waiting list in the city of Sevilla, and I will bring the armor here, and I will look at it, and if it is how does he say this? And knowing that it will only cost me 1 fortune, and that the reflection I see in it is my own.
That is like some badass spite right there.
Right.
Like deep spite.
Takedown.
Fucking mic drop, man. Brilliant, Chris. All right, well, to close out, I've got a 2-parter to ask you. If you can offer listeners and viewers a good bit of soundbite writing advice, and B, a weird or random fact that you find to be utterly fascinating.
Any kind of fact?
Any fact at all.
Any fact.
Okay, soundbite writing advice. If you're going to self-publish, pay for the editor. Get an editor. An editor is worth their weight in gold. Don't rush to publish because you can't unshoot that gun. If you're going to put a book out there into this world, into this merciless, permanent internet fucking bug and amber world, make sure it's the prettiest bug it can be, because you put it out under a title, it's going to get reviewed, it's going to get stomped on, it's going to get punched, it's going to get fucking. What's this thing they do in Japan where they do this to your butt? That. There's a word for it. There's like a thing that they do
where they pull your innards out of your asshole.
No, they'll look for a joke. They'll go up behind you and poke you in the butthole like that, and it's called something like maybe concho or something. I forget.
Okay. Oh, it's like a
It's called. That sounds awful.
or like a cop, it'll just pop out of the river and pull your intestines out of your butt.
There you go.
Do you like how I also gave you your random fact?
Yeah.
There you go. Oh, look at that.
If anyone wants to know more about Japan and buttholes, there you go. It's a 2-for-1.
Right. Chris is your guy.
I totally agree, though. It's like, it's merciless. Goodreads is merciless. Amazon reviews are merciless. It's like readers can be merciless. So it's like, put out something that you're confident in and put in
something that you believe in enough that you can take the mercilessness, because it will come even if you get the editor. But just what is it with
Goodreads? Like you can go on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Audible. You can go to all these other places and read reviews, and they're like, "Yeah, this is good. I don't know if I like this one thing, but it was nice. Here's 4.3 stars. No, 4. They'll round up on Amazon. They'll be like, it's a 4.5, but here's a 5.
They'll round the
On
fuck down on
Goodreads, these stingy motherfuckers will be like, well, that was a high 3.5. He says over his 3-star review. Loved it. Almost made it. But
oh my God.
I only give 4 stars to family.
Family. With 5 stars up for the
his knowledge of bridges is lacking. 3 stars. Do more research, Chris.
I'll get you every time. The inaccurate bridges.
Oh man. All right. Well, Chris, thank you so much for chatting with MJ and I today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Same.
Yeah, really, really appreciate it.
Same.
As well, for anyone who contributes to our Patreon at $5 or more a month, you can hear a reading from Chris from The Daughter's War. So go check that out. And Chris, if you could let listeners and viewers know where they can find you online.
Yeah, well, my website is absolute shit, so don't look at that. But I do have a Facebook presence and an Instagram presence, and I'm still reluctantly hanging on to Twitter. But go to Instagram or Facebook.
Place to be. All right, you can also follow SFF Addicts on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, all that jazz at SFF Addicts Pod. You can follow me at Adrian M. Gibson. You can go get a copy of my book, Mushroom Blues, in ebook, paperback, and hardcover. MJ, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me across all the main socials, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, blah, 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 at MJ Kuhn Books, all one word, or just go to mjkuhn.com. And yeah, get my books, feed my cat.
The Thorin Food Fund.
The Thorin Food Fund.
He needs foods.
He does. I'm trying to make him chonky. He's too skinny.
He's like 90% fur, but
he is. He really is. He's like, you pick him up, it's like, woo.
Oh man. All right, well, that's it for this episode. Stay tuned next week for part 2 with Chris for a mini masterclass on making old monsters new again. Now, keep reading, keep imagining, and we'll see you next time on SFF Addicts.